The bomb didn't beat Japan. Stalin did. Section. Timing. The first problem with the traditional interpretation is timing. And it is a serious problem. The traditional interpretation has a simple timeline. The U.S. Army Air Force bombs Hiroshima with a nuclear weapon on August 6th. 3 days later, they bombed Nagasaki with another. And on the next day, the Japanese signaled their intention to surrender. One can hardly blame American newspapers for running headlines like, "Peace in the Pacific, our bomb did it." When the story of Hiroshima is told in most American histories, the day of the bombing, August 6th, serves as the narrative climax. All the elements of the story point forward to that moment. The decision to build a bomb, the secret research at Los Alamos, the impressive first test, and the final culmination at Hiroshima. It is told, in other words, as a story about the bomb. But you can't analyze Japan's decision to surrender objectively in the context of the story of the bomb. Casting it as a, quote, the story of the bomb, already presumes that the bomb's role is central. Viewed from the Japanese perspective, the most important day in that second week of August wasn't August the 6th, but August the 9th. That was the day that the Supreme Council met, for the first time in the war, to discuss unconditional surrender. The Supreme Council was a group of 6 top members of the government, a sort of inner cabinet, that effectively ruled Japan in 1945. Japan's leaders had not seriously considered surrendering prior to that day. Unconditional surrender, what the Allies were demanding, was a bitter pill to swallow. The United States and Great Britain were already convening war crimes trials in Europe. What if they decided to put the emperor, who was believed to be divine, on trial? What if they got rid of the emperor and changed the form of government entirely? Even though the situation was bad in the summer of 1945, the leaders of Japan were not willing to consider giving up their traditions, their beliefs, or their way of life. Until August 9th. What could have happened that caused them to so suddenly and decisively change their minds? What made them sit down to seriously discuss surrender for the first time after 14 years of war? It could not have been Nagasaki. The bombing of Nagasaki occurred in the late morning of August 9th, after the Supreme Council had already begun meeting to discuss surrender. And word of the bombing only reached Japan's leaders in the early afternoon, after the meeting of the Supreme Council had been adjourned in deadlock, and the full cabinet had been called upon to take up the discussion. Based on timing alone, Nagasaki can't have been what motivated them. Hiroshima isn't a very good candidate either. It came 74 hours, more than 3 days, earlier. What kind of crisis takes 3 days to unfold? The hallmark of a crisis is a sense of impending disaster and the overwhelming desire to take action now. How could Japan's leaders have felt that Hiroshima touched off a crisis, and yet not meet to talk about the problem for 3 days? President John F. Kennedy was sitting up in bed reading the morning papers at about 8:45 a.m. on October 16, 1962, when George McBundy, his national security advisor, came in to inform him that the Soviet Union was secretly putting nuclear missiles in Cuba. Within 2 hours and 45 minutes, a special committee had been created, its members selected, contacted, brought to the White House, and were seated around the cabinet table to discuss what should be done. President Harry Truman was vacationing in Independence, Missouri on June 25, 1950, when North Korea sent its troops across the 38th parallel, invading South Korea. Secretary of State Acheson called Truman that Saturday morning to give him the news. Within 24 hours, Truman had flown halfway across the United States and was seated at Blair House. The White House was undergoing renovations, with his top military and political advisors talking about what to do. Even General George Brinton McClellan, the Union commander of the Army of the Potomac in 1863 during the American Civil War, of whom President Lincoln said sadly, quote, "He's got the slows," wasted only 12 hours when he was given a captured copy of General Robert E. Lee's orders for the invasion of Maryland. These leaders responded, as leaders in any country would, to the imperative call that a crisis creates. They each took decisive steps in a short period of time. How can we square this sort of behavior with the actions of Japan's leaders? If Hiroshima really touched off a crisis that eventually forced the Japanese to surrender after fighting for 14 years, why did it take them 3 days to sit down to discuss it? One might argue that the delay is perfectly logical. Perhaps they only came to realize the importance of the bombing slowly. Perhaps they didn't know it was a nuclear weapon, and when they did realize it and understood the terrible effects such a weapon could have, they naturally concluded that they had to surrender. Unfortunately, this explanation doesn't square with evidence. First, Hiroshima's governor reported at Tokyo on the very day Hiroshima was bombed that about a third of the population had been killed in the attack, and that 2/3 of the city had been destroyed. This information didn't change over the next several days. So the outcome, the end result of the bombing, was clear from the beginning. Japan's leaders knew roughly the outcome of the attack on the first day, yet they still did not act. Second, the preliminary report prepared by the Army team that investigated the Hiroshima bombing, the one that gave details about what had happened there, was not delivered until August 10th. It didn't reach Tokyo, in other words, until after the decision to surrender had already been taken. Although their verbal report was delivered to the military on August 8th, the details of the bombing were not available until 2 days later. The decision to surrender was therefore not based on a deep appreciation of the horror at Hiroshima. Third, the Japanese military understood, at least in a rough way, what nuclear weapons were. Japan had a nuclear weapons program. Several of the military men mentioned the fact that it was a nuclear weapon that destroyed Hiroshima in their diaries. General Anami Korechika, Minister of War, even went to consult with the head of the Japanese nuclear weapons program on the night of August the 7th. The idea that Japan's leaders didn't know about nuclear weapons doesn't hold up. Finally, one other fact about timing creates a striking problem. On August the 8th, Foreign Minister Togo Shigenori went to Premier Suzuki Kantaro and asked that the Supreme Council be convened to discuss the bombing of Hiroshima, but its members declined. So the crisis didn't grow day by day until it finally burst into full bloom on August the 9th. Any explanation of the actions of Japan's leaders that relies on the shock of the bombing of Hiroshima has to account for the fact that they considered a meeting to discuss the bombing on August the 8th, made a judgment that it was too unimportant, and then suddenly decided to meet to discuss surrender the very next day. Either they succumbed to some sort of group schizophrenia, or some other event was the real motivation to discuss surrender. End of section.